Monster Hunter has many addictive aspects of its gameplay that has us fans coming back for more time and time again. So today I will be going over 10 satisfying things from Monster Hunter, so let me know down below if there is anything that isn't on this list that you think should be, and without wasting any more time, let's jump straight into the video. In no particular order, we're starting off this list strong with tail cuts. There are a bunch of monsters in the Monster Hunter franchise, as you'd expect, with many of them having tails that are able to be severed by the player as long as the damage done to the tail is cutting damage opposed to blunt damage. This can be very satisfying on monsters with bigger tails, and there's nothing like seeing that fat chunk of tail come off the monster for it to scurry forward soon after. There are a few monsters that can be quite annoying though. Monsters that are fast on their feet, or even monsters that have small tails, can be very annoying to deal with if you are going for that tail cut, but overall getting that tail off generally is one of the most satisfying aspects of the Monster Hunter gameplay loop. Next up on the list, similar to tail cuts, we have part breaks. So many monsters do have parts of their body that you are able to break, for example their horn or claw. In many cases, horns would be the go-to for a lot of monsters, and the one that comes to mind with being one of the more satisfying breaks is Fatalis and its horn, which can be broken twice, and each time you do break its horn, it does get stunned quite severely, where you can get a lot of damage in, so it is very satisfying considering the difficulty of the battle. So having that little free period to deal as much damage as you possibly can without the fear of being hit back, it is extremely satisfying to get to that position. Of course, getting the break in the first place can be hard for different monsters. It of course varies in difficulty, but with Fatalis especially, it does have its head quite high up a lot of the time, and in the cases it is low down, it can be very dangerous to be around its head. But of course, as I said, it does vary from monster to monster, but overall it is extremely satisfying when you see that break animation, or even just the pop-up where you know you've broken the monster's horn or claw, whatever the part may be that is able to be broken. Next up, we have finding a monster drop that you've been looking for the longest time, and it has just not been dropping for you. This could be anything from a monster's gem, a plate, or a mantle, or anything a monster could drop that has a low drop rate, and it's just so annoying when you've slain a monster 20 times or even more times where the monster has not dropped that one material you're looking for, even though you've done everything that you possibly could do to increase your chances of getting that drop, whether that's breaking the head, getting the tail carves, or capturing the monster. It is so satisfying when you finally do get that drop, as I've even had cases where I got double gem drops, or like a double drop of a extremely rare material when I wasn't looking for it, and there was nothing more satisfying than finding that one material that you've been looking for the longest time, slaying the same monster repeatedly, only for it to drop after like 30 reward screens after slaying that monster. But yeah guys, let me know down below if you've ever been in that situation where you've been looking for a specific monster drop and it has been evading you for the longest time, and I look forward to hearing your horror stories. But yeah, coming up next on the list, we have stunning a monster at the right time. So I'm sure a lot of us have had this situation where you might be at low health, or you're just fighting a monster like normal. There's nothing at risk in terms of you dying, but a monster's about to execute an extremely deadly move on you, and you manage to hit it at the exact point in time where you're able to cancel the monster's move and stun it, and it's just such a satisfying feeling. It could be anything from like the Diabolos's charge, where you're able to hit it with a hammer or something to stun it and break its horn, or even a Rathian, where it does its backflip poison attack, where you smack the tail at just the right point where it cancels out its backflip, you don't get poisoned, and you knock it out of the sky. I think that's definitely one of my favourite and most satisfying points in a Monster Hunter battle, and it has definitely happened quite a few times. But then again, I have played Monster Hunter for quite a long time, so you could say that the percentage is quite low, but it's definitely one of those experiences that you remember the most in terms of just your Monster Hunter experiences. So let me know down below what your craziest monster stun was at the right point in time, and I look forward to reading all of your comments. Next up, we have countering every move. So this would be more for longsword players, but of course now there's a lot of counter attacks across the board for many of the other weapons. But I think Monster Hunter World started pushing a lot of the countering style of gameplay, especially with, of course, the longsword, as I said. But for me personally, when I did get into the longsword, I was so addicted to just being able to, or at least trying to, counter every single move the monster could throw at me, and it was just so satisfying to pull it off. And that does lead us into our next one, which is relatively similar, and that is dodging every single move the monster has to throw at you, but especially when you're at low HP. So this is extremely evident in the more difficult encounters in the Monster Hunter franchise, and there's just so much satisfaction and such a big thrill when you're constantly rolling out of the way and doing emergency dives out of the way of the monster's attacks, because if it even touches you with any of its attacks, you're going to be carted. And when you're having just one life left especially, it just raises the stakes so much higher. So that is definitely on the list of most satisfying things in the Monster Hunter series. Up next on the list of satisfaction in Monster Hunter, we have knocking a flying monster out of the sky. And this can be extremely satisfying, especially for monsters like Rathalos and its various variants, like Azure Rathalos and Silver Rathalos, where they do tend to fly in the sky a lot, and if you are a Blade Master player, it can be extremely annoying as there's not a lot you can do. You're pretty much just having to dodge around the monster's attacks and possibly being able to flash bomb it out of the sky if it's close enough to the ground. But of course, a lot of times with Rathalos, it can fly quite high, especially when it does its circling attack, where you're just unable to do pretty much anything unless you are a gunner. So I definitely think this does deserve a spot on the list. Up next we have killing a monster that has carted you too many times. For me personally, there is only one monster that comes to mind when I read this statement, and I'm sure a lot of you can probably relate to this, and that is Monster Hunter World's Fatalis. Of course, he did come with the Iceborne expansion, and this was the one monster in the entire game which gave me so many carts that I've just forgotten how many times it's carted me, and all I remember of the first day was not having a single kill on the monster. And I do remember very vividly, it was midnight of the next day where I got the kill, and it was such a satisfying feeling. Like, I felt like I had won the lottery with how many times I'd attempted it. And I remember that I stunned it with a ballista and then just went in with my dual blades, and it finally died. And I'm sure many of you who did have a similar experience probably can remember that first kill, as there is something about being carted tons and tons of times only to finally slay the monster that you just don't forget about, and Fatalis is definitely the monster for me. So definitely drop a comment down below what monster that is for you and how the experience went down, as I'm sure a lot of you probably do remember the experience, as it is one of those Monster Hunter satisfying experiences that you just don't forget. So I look forward to reading all of your comments, and that brings us on to our final two satisfying things in Monster Hunter. So with the second to last one, we have waking up a sleeping monster in style. So of course, if you have played Monster Hunter a decent amount, you probably will know what I'm on about, and it goes from anything along the lines of setting up bombs to wake it up. It could be lining up the perfect elemental discharge with your charge blade, or even just a nice, well-timed true charge slash with your greatsword. There are countless ways people have discovered in waking up a monster in the most damage effective way with the various weapons that we have access to in the Monster Hunter mainline games. So that is easily one of the more simpler but extremely satisfying things in Monster Hunter. Finally, we have the number 10 spot on the list, and once again this is in no particular order, so I'm not ranking anything above the other. And that final thing is when proof of a hero plays in a battle. So this is, of course, the main Monster Hunter theme, and it is considered generally the theme of your hunter as well, and it does only play a handful of times throughout the series, and of course those are at pivotal moments, like when you're repelling Lao Shanlong, and in Monster Hunter World, more recently, is when you wound Fatalis with the Dragonator, it begins to play. Of course, there are a bunch of other times it does play throughout the story, but I don't want to mention every single point, as it's not really necessary for the sake of the point. And I feel like it's like the perfect sense of nostalgia for the older fans, alongside hype for pretty much every fan when you are fighting those large-scale battles. Of course, in Fatalis' case, those high-stake battles. Not necessarily that Fatalis is massive, but he is very destructive, especially in terms of lore. But I think this is the perfect, satisfying thing from Monster Hunter to round off the list with. Let me know down below if there is anything that isn't on this list that you think should be, and also what you think is the most satisfying thing from the Monster Hunter franchise, specifically with the mainline games. As always, a like would be extremely appreciated if you did enjoy. It does help out the channel a ton, and don't forget to subscribe for a lot more Monster Hunter content. Be sure to join our Discord, links at the top of the description, where there is a lot of awesome other hunters in there, and we'd love to have you with us. And thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.